In today's video, I will be narrating 3 terrifying stories. Picking up a night shift position at a pharmacy seems like a relaxed job, but the horrors it reveals will prove to be much the opposite. A story of a trusty canine friend, and a story about the dark that will definitely send goosebumps up your spine. Also, I'm sure you're wondering about the avatar on the side of your screen. Yeah Man TV recently made a new illustration for the channel, and I'm pretty excited about it. One last thing. This video was recorded during last night's stream. Thank you to everyone who's been showing up to those. It's always fun hanging out with you guys and just kicking it back. If you enjoy the video, please be sure to drop a like and comment. Subscribing if you're new is also very much appreciated. Enjoy the video. And as always, I hope you all have a great night. I've said it before, I'll say it again. Unemployment sucks. I started my professional career right around the time of the Great American Recession in 2008. Perfect timing. People were taking any gig they could get. Lawyers did construction, accountants worked in fast food. My dad even jumped back out of retirement, just to help pay off the last remaining debt on our mortgage. Pundits called it the summer of underemployment, and even still, I threw my tiny little resume out to every local business I could find. The callbacks trickled in at 1 or 2 a week. I delivered pizzas for a bit. I managed the checkout line at ShopRite for a couple months. I even lifeguarded a water park with coworkers half my age. All of this with a bachelor's degree already under my belt. Ultimately, I settled for a gig at the local pharmacy and entered into the worst job of my young adult life. Leonard Pharmacy. The store sat in what could be politely called the most underdeveloped part of our small town. Opiate addiction was common for the area. So was petty crime. A lot of families who lived nearby survived off disability payments, Social Security, and wilting retirement accounts. Some of them were so hooked on our little white pills that they were in our shop once or twice a week. My boss called them the regulars. The owner was a short, wiry man named Devish. Devish traveled to the States in his early 30s, with a goal of finding a better life for his growing family. He picked a good line of work for it. The pill-popping business boomed in our town. Months after opening the first pharmacy, Devish could afford to open a second store in a nearby town, then a third, and a fourth. By the time he had a restaurant to go with his medical real estate portfolio, the original Leonard Pharmacy became sort of an afterthought. Devish hired a second pharmacist to take over his shifts. He spent less and less time behind the counter, or in the store, and more at his other businesses. And that was when the stealing started to become a serious problem. "It's always stupid stuff," he told me on the job interview. "Sure, we get some people with the fake scripts, but the cops will take that seriously. It happens once and never again. Not so much efforts with the candle thief." "Candle thief?" I asked deliriously, trying to hold back a chuckle. Who would steal candles? Devish grimaced. "I lost at least 5 of them a week, and they are expensive. Yankee Candle, $10 a pop from the vendor." He paused and noticed my reaction. The police are the same way. All a big joke, right? But I can't afford to lose merchandise. Razor-thin margins. And the pharmacist can't watch the shelves all day. I am really in a bad situation, man. A nervous feeling started to fill my gut. "You want me to watch people?" He laughed. No, not watch. You'll be doing maintenance. You can help stock shelves, ring up general items, empty the garbages, count the register. Obviously, you can't assist with the pharmacy, but your responsibility will be everything else. Everything in the store except the prescriptions. I thanked him and said I would think about it, but I didn't wait that long. I mentioned the idea to my mother, and she approved. My dad said it could be a good way to learn about small businesses, so I guess he liked it. Even my little sister thought it would be cool for me to work at the place she always got her energy drinks before school. And on top of it all, I liked Devish. Moreover, I respected him. He seemed like a good guy trying to carve out his part of the world. I guess it sounded exciting to be a part of it. I could learn from somebody like that, and the pay beats any pizza place out there. I came back the next day and asked him to sign me up for the night shift. He hired me on the spot. The first few months were uneventful. Most of my bad experiences revolved around expired scripts and impatient people. I bounced a couple of junkies in the first few weeks. I had to call the cops once or twice. I started to settle into my regular shift of 5 to 9, Monday through Saturday. I welcomed the consistency of it, but the candles continued to go missing. I had to admire the thief's ingenuity. He never hit more than once a day. He knew how to time the crowds. Usually after dealing with a herd of 4 to 5 customers, I would do my usual rounds of the store, only to find the telltale empty box sitting on the shelf. The thief actually went through the time to take it out of the packaging and leave the glass top behind. I wondered whether it had something to do with the barcode at the time. I kept my eyes on the customers as much as possible, as the missing candles began to stack up, and yet at a certain point, it became offensive to follow people around. More than once somebody asked me what I was doing, and I was forced to fall back on the excuse of stocking the shelves. I realized that someone might find my intentions race-based and not candle-based. That made me even more uncomfortable, but the boss didn't care. Devish stopped in the store one early Saturday evening, on his way to the restaurant. I could tell he was incensed from the get-go. "Buddy, I hired you to stop the candle guy, and all my candles are still gone. What gives?" I shrugged and tried to explain the difficulties of tracking the movements of 100 customers a day on my own. I told him about how it made me uncomfortable to follow people. He nodded and threw up an impatient hand. "Okay, understood. I'm not stocking candles anymore. They didn't sell well anyway, and the company charges too high of a premium. Razor-thin margins, buddy." Devish caught me breathing a sigh of relief and continued. "I still want you to watch the shelves. A thief is a thief. This won't stop him from stealing." I agreed, thanked him, and sent him on his way with a fat envelope of money. Must be nice. I worked through the night shift with a new plan to give up on following people. Screw it, screw him. I resigned to the fact that if the thief did move on to another object, say air fresheners, we would deal with that travesty once the evidence became clear. Devish would probably need some video cameras, not a human spy. The day moved a lot quicker with that in my mind. Before I got another chance to look at the clock, it was already 9:30. 1 hour to closing. The store looked dark and empty as the customer walked out with their 24-pack of water bottles. I disappeared to the back room to grab my jacket. When I returned, an unfamiliar man was waiting at the counter. The guy looked unremarkable compared to the rest of the population of downtown Leonard. He was around 5'5", white, with blonde hair and light brown eyes. He wore Timberlands, wrinkled jeans, and an oversized gray jacket with a whole mess of hoods and zippers. He spoke quietly and nervously, with a hint of an out-of-area accent. I didn't respond to him any differently than the thousands of customers that came before. "Hi, welcome to Leonard. Can I help you?" "Hi, do you have any more candles in stock?" Jackpot. I know it sounds stupid, but my heart actually started to pound in my chest. The thrill of the catch was in my sights. Not a single soul, in 2 full months on the job, had ever asked if we carried candles. Nobody even bought them, to my knowledge, although Devish claimed otherwise. My fingers ran towards the panic button on the counter. I had to call the police. But on what suspicion? Asking about candles in a pharmacy is most definitely not a crime. I had to bait him, but I didn't know how. So I stupidly said the obvious. Sorry man, we're out of stock." His expression changed in a heartbeat. Placid brown eyes turned panicked and began to dart back and forth. He turned to look into the corners of the store. His ruddy red complexion became fully flushed. His voice cracked with anxiety. "Oh my God. Please tell me you have them in the back." I stared at him. My grasp found the raised emergency button. I begged the idiot to come after me. One push would be all it took. "No, somebody has been stealing them. Sound familiar?" I thought the man would react to my accusation. That would be a normal thing, right? To deny it or confirm it. Instead, he ran to the front door and slammed it shut. Then he turned to face me. "Are there any other entrances? He's coming." I laughed. "Who is coming? What are you talking about?" He ignored me by running towards the bathroom. "You can't get in there without a key." He rushed back towards me. I noticed a wet spot forming just by his leg. "Look, I don't have time to explain. I'm sorry, but he's coming. He told me he's coming. We need to hide." I realized he must be crazy. The man just wet himself in public. A fierce wind picked up just outside the pharmacy. The dead leaves still drifting through our lot kicked up, and created an awkward scraping on the pavement. I stayed behind the counter, and kept my eye on the guy, unsure of what to do next. He continued to ramble, unaware of my comments. "The candles. The candles keep them away. I'm sorry, I don't know why. I think it's the smell. I tried to pay for some of them. I tried to pay for what I could." That sounded like a confession. I punched the panic button. "The sheriff department is on its way, sir." He laughed. "You can call the police. Good, please call them. But they won't make it in time. They never make it in time. I don't even know what they would do if they did make it in time." The wind continued to pounce its way through the parking lot. For a moment it became so severe that the foundation of the building actually seemed to shake. What followed was an unexpected downpouring of white sheets of water. Heavy droplets of hail pounded the ceiling over our heads. The Weather Channel never called for rain, to my knowledge. The man began to moan. "Oh God. Oh God, he's coming. That's it. Once he sees you, he's coming. And there's nothing left to do. Nothing to do but die." He rushed back over the entrance, and held his foot in front of the door. 5 more minutes, I told myself. 5 more minutes before the police met their response time. The rain might slow them down some, sure, but how long could it be? 10 minutes? 12? The man never appeared dangerous. He just ranted and raved away. "It's the candle, you see. It's that scent. He doesn't like it. But it has to be that flavor. Leprum. You know, it's expired. They don't make it anymore. You think they know how it works? And that's why they don't make it anymore? I think that's why. I hope I die. I hope we both die before that thing gets here." I had about enough of this. I pulled a gun from behind the counter and leveled it at the madman's head. Devish knew enough to keep me protected, and I knew enough to take lessons at the range. "Get out. This is my final warning. Get out of the store." The short little man stared at me blankly. I can hear him talking to me now. He says he's going to get me. He says he's going to get you too. I fired a warning shot into the glass. The dude ducked and fell onto the floor, screaming and shrieking like a banshee as the broken shards collapsed onto the folds of his coat. I groaned and reloaded the rifle as he writhed around on the floor like a snake. "Get out of here," I shouted back. And just as suddenly as he started, the screaming suddenly stopped. The man got up and smiled. His ruddy face painted a weird, sick little smile that suggested he knew something I didn't. Then he jumped through the broken glass and ran into the parking lot. Finally. I followed into the parking lot and tried to catch an idea of where he might be headed for the police. The storm started to get worse. I shielded my eyes from the rain and held on to the railing for balance. The thief tripped by the edge of the parking lot and fell hard on his knees. I laughed. He placed himself perfectly under the only lamp post on our property. He tried to get up again, but fell backwards as a strong gust of wind pushed forward. I barely had to do anything. I thought to myself. Job well done, Storm. The man started to shriek again. I thought it might be the after effects of whatever sick stuff he sucked up into his veins. I lazily followed his line of sight, in the direction of his outstretched arm, and nearly choked on my spit when I saw it. Crouched by the corner of the woods sat a creature taller than me. Before I could react, its shadow shot out from between the trees. It looked like a dog, or a wolf at first. All I could tell about the animal was that it traveled on all fours. It charged for the poor little thief mercilessly. I tried to aim my gun. I tried to shoot at it. I think I even got a bullet off in its vicinity, but the blur of movement traveled so quickly that I could barely get a scope on it. I shielded my eyes to see, got my gun ready again, and before 10 seconds had passed, blood exited my new friend's neck in a horrific red stream. I screamed. The creature turned its head in my direction. I couldn't see it very well, but I could feel its harsh eyes bore into me from across the parking lot. I backed away towards the store. Those cold eyes followed me steadily. It looked angry. It ignored the bleeding out carcass of the thief in front of it, and stared at me directly. It ignored the pouring rain. It didn't move. It didn't threaten to attack. It just studied me. The warm handle of Leonard's hit my back like a safety valve. I darted back inside and cut the lights to the store in one smooth motion. The police arrived exactly 3 painstaking minutes later. I tried to explain everything that happened. I tried to tell them about the thief. I tried to tell them about the animal. I tried to tell them about everything that happened before and after the story above. But they didn't believe me. Nobody believes me. And it's easy to say why. They never found a man matching my description. They never found a blood stain in the parking lot. All of the video cameras showed static for the entirety of my shift. And all of the missing person leads turned up empty, based on my description. I must have sounded like a liar. The police said it never rained in Leonard that night either. I was baffled at the time. I had no explanation for the events that occurred, other than the bizarre account above, and so I kept it to myself. For over a decade, I just kept it to myself. But I'm not confused anymore. I'm not embarrassed. I'm not ashamed to say that the story above really did happen to me at Leonard Pharmacy. And now I'm just scared. Because last night, around 6, my small family sat down to dinner on our patio. The weather was beautiful. The sun was just starting to go down over the magnificent woods in Leonard. My wife put out a full spread of burgers, fries, and drinks. The American way. I remember spoon-feeding our youngest daughter, and thinking nothing could be more perfect in life. But just as the sun dipped behind the trees, the wind picked up, and a terrible crack of thunder echoed from above. The rain followed soon after in familiar white sheets of unending water. I ushered the kids inside and helped my wife with the dishes. Just as she grabbed the last one, I remembered the umbrella, and rushed back outside to tie it down. The massive evergreens creaked nervously on the corner of our property. I looked toward them nervously, and that's when I saw him. That's when I heard him. The creature sat on all fours, but it still stood taller than me. Its back arched lazily. I opened my mouth to scream, but could not even try. I knew then that it must be my time. Even still, I turned and ran back inside. I don't know why. I kept a couple of candles burning inside the kitchen. I knew enough to save some from storage, but they won't last long. They never last long, and it almost doesn't matter. Once he sees you, there's nothing left to do. You heard the guy. Nothing left to do but die. I recently had an experience that has fundamentally changed me. A horrifying, violent experience that should have left me terrified has instead left me with a feeling of ease and peace. Knowing that, no matter what happens, my family and I have a ever-vigilant guardian watching us, and ready to protect us whenever we are threatened. His name is Duke. and what he has done for my family could never be repaid with all the riches in the world. This is our story. My fiance and I were 20 years old and living in an old rundown house trailer, living paycheck to paycheck as flat, broke college students. On my way home from work on a frigid winter day in northern Michigan, I saw a sight that instantly infuriated me. Tied to a mailbox with about a 2-foot leash was a little puppy, no matter than a few months old. He was lying in the snow, shivering terribly and exhausted from trying to free himself. He looked as though he had given up and resigned himself to his fate. When he saw me approaching, all he could muster was a slight wag of his tail and a quiet whimper. I unhooked him, brought him to my car, and took him home. After he warmed up and had some food and water, he was the happiest little guy I have ever seen. He was a golden retriever lab mix with big floppy ears and huge paws that he couldn't take 2 steps without tripping over. His fur was a deep golden color like a fine bourbon, and he was the kindest animal I had ever met. We named him Duke because even as a small puppy, he had a very broad chest and always would stand tall with his head high, as though he was royalty and demanded your respect. He grew up to be a physically imposing animal at over 95 pounds, without an ounce of fat on him, a true gentle giant. Duke was like my first child. Whenever I was home, he was with me, and every night he would sleep on the floor by my side. My fiance and I ended up getting married, moving to a nice house, and having 3 little boys. As children do, they would ride Duke like a horse and pull on his tail, but he never seemed to mind. He always seemed to have a special bond with our youngest boy. Whenever we had visitors at our house, Duke was never far away from him, always watching as if he was ready to spring into action at the first sign of danger. Time went by and Duke started to grow old. His face was turning white. He didn't move very fast anymore, and he enjoyed most of his days napping in the sunlight. My wife is now an RN and works 3rd shift, and I work early mornings, so I am home alone with the kids most of the nights. I always sleep soundly knowing Duke is there by my side. One night I wake up to Duke growling and scratching at the door to our youngest son's room. Our son is about 18 months old, and his door is never closed, so in a panic I bolt to his door, open in and flick the light on. I freeze for what seems like an eternity. In front of me is a well-built man, in his early 40s, holding my child with his hand over his mouth to muffle his screams, while trying to climb out the window to take him away. As I stood frozen in shock and fear, Duke immediately leaped into action with a ferocity I've only seen in a lion taking down his prey. Duke grabs the man by the hand, pulling him to the floor, forcing him to release my child, who I immediately grab. I sprint down the hall to the other boys' room to scoop them out of their beds, and I run, carrying all 3 of them, to my workshop behind the house, where I call the police and pray that Duke is alright. The police come to get us from the shop after they clear the house, and inside I find Duke covered in blood, with one of his ears torn off. Nonetheless, he was excited and happy to see us, but clearly tired and sore. So even with police and detectives buzzing around the house, still he lays down to take a nap. One of the detectives shows me an evidence bag containing the ring and little finger that Duke had bitten off the man who tried to take my son away from me. He said they would run the prints in the morning and find the guy responsible. The next day, after returning home from the vet to get Duke's ear fixed up, I got a call from a detective named Bill Langley in Missouri, who told me that the fingers belonged to a fugitive named Wesley, who he was trying to track down for months. Johnson had been seen on home security footage taking a young boy from a house in Missouri who was found a few days later, dismembered and scattered in the woods. I stopped Langley there, as the idea of what he just said was making me feel ill, and I didn't want to hear any more. He replied, "Son, you better make sure that dog lives like a king for the rest of his days, 'cause he saved your boy from horrors that you couldn't even imagine." They were never able to track down Johnston, so every night I would lie awake terrified that he would return to finish what he started. The only thing that was able to put me at peace enough to sleep was reaching down and feeling Duke on the floor next to me. About a year passed by, and one morning I got up to go to work. But Duke didn't get up with me like he always did. He had died peacefully in his sleep during the nights. I wrapped him up in his favorite blankets, and buried him outside under a big maple tree that he loved to lay under in the summertime. My father made a cross for his grave that read, "Duke, best dog that man could ever ask for. May he love and watch over our family in death, as he did in life." In our bedroom we have a large glass door that I can look out and see Duke's grave from my bed. Sometimes at night I would turn the porch light on, so I can see it, and it helps put me at ease whenever I can't sleep. A couple weeks after Duke died, something happened that I can't explain, other than the loyalty and devotion of a faithful dog that can transcend even death itself. I bolted upright in the middle of the night, drenched in cold sweat and terrified. I flicked the porch light on to put myself at ease, when I noticed something on Duke's grave. Curious, I grabbed my flashlight and went outside to get a better look. There, nailed to Duke's cross, was the shriveled remains of his missing ear. Written below were the words, "Here, have it back." Panic washes over me as I process what I am seeing. I scream as I sprint back into my house, to my son's room expecting the worst, when I see that his door is closed once again. As I throw the door open and flick on the light, the horrible scene that I was confronted with was an amazing juxtaposition of what should have been deeply disturbing, yet left me feeling calm and at peace for the first time since I had almost lost my son. It was completely silent. My little boy was sound asleep, snuggled up in his blankets. Sitting on the floor leaning against the wall was a large man wearing a ski mask. His throat had been ripped out. With one hand he is pressing on his neck, trying to quench the flow of blood spraying out of his severed artery. He looks to me with terrified eyes, and reaches out to me with his other hand, silently moaning, "Help me." As his eyes unfocus and glaze over, his hands fall to the floor, and only then do I notice it. Clenched tightly between his thumb and two remaining fingers is a tuft of deep golden fur. I've been blind since the moment of birth. Lack of oxygen and a complicated pregnancy came with the unfortunate privilege of brain damage. And as it is, I'm suffering from what the doctors call cortical blindness. To put it simply, my eyes work perfectly, but my brain doesn't know how to interpret the input. More specifically, the disease is called redox syndrome, meaning that although I've never seen a person smile or experienced the beauty of the setting sun, hell, I don't even know what my own mother looks like, but I can still perceive a hint of movement, and I can distinguish night from day. Seeing as I'm visually challenged, I've had little use for movies and television. Instead, I've found an everlasting love for books, Braille paperbacks, as well as audio. Horror, romance, action, it's all equally amazing in my eyes. Anything that allows me to escape the dull sense of reality and submerge myself into whatever story I put my hands on. Horror being my favorite, which has given me an undying curiosity for phobias and the mystical. In addition to all this, I am also terrified of the dark. It might be a bit cliché. I mean, everyone is afraid of the dark, aren't they? At least people who can see and appreciate the sudden loss of such an important sense. Without warning, they have to rely on their other senses, their hearing rapidly taking over as the dominant way of monitoring their environment, turning each creak in any old house into something sinister and evil. So, as someone who has always relied on hearing, it has always been confusing that I feel so damned uncomfortable when I'm alone, in the empty void of darkness. That was before I realized that we're never truly alone. I obsessed for a few months, reading up on various theories about why we fear the dark. Most ideas came with the assumption that we can usually see, which didn't really explain my phobia. The only way I could find out was to conduct a minor experiment myself. I would stay awake into the night, and simply listen to the darkness, and try to come up with any feasible conclusion. Nightfall came quickly in anticipation of the project. and I placed myself nicely wrapped in a blanket, on the edge of my bed. An hour, maybe two, passed, as I listened intently. A creak here and there, maybe some wind blowing leaves off their branches. Nothing peculiar. Fear quickly turned to boredom, and my mind started to drift off. My body felt tired, and I was within reach of a peaceful slumber. I was jolted to reality when I saw something move quickly in my periphery. Just for a moment, short enough to be written off as a figment of my tired mind. But nevertheless, it caused me to snap back to attention. I held my breath and waited. It must have been a trick of the mind. Logically, I shouldn't be able to see any movement in complete darkness. No light to reflect off the surface, thus nothing to stimulate my eyes. Out of nowhere, I saw something move again, just silently walking by my eyes. I couldn't tell exactly what it was, but it seemed to be a tall, lanky figure, humanoid in shape to the best of my interpretation, but far too skinny. It glanced in my direction, seeming to notice my change in posture from relaxed to terrified. It stopped moving and turned invisible, at least to my eyes, as I couldn't see fixed objects, only moving ones.
"You see me?"
The creature said in a raspy, dark whisper that echoed impossibly around the room, the air filled with dread. I remained silent, my mind running wild about what would happen in the next few seconds.
"You are blind, I see. Not so dulled out by the colors of daily life. Your mind not polluted by vision."
The creature stood closer then, inching its way towards me. I could feel its breath on my face and back. It was cold, rotten, and bitter. It made the hairs on my back stand up. What are you?" I stuttered. It laughed at my question, a guttural sound escaping its mouth alongside its putrid breath.
"You want to know my being?"
It asked. The words got stuck in my throat. I simply nodded in response.
"Then I shall show you what I am."
Without hesitating, the creature lifted its arm and rested it on my head. The fingers felt slimy and cold on my skin. Within a second, the room lit up, revealing all the colors of the world at once, burning them painfully into my brain. I could see, but not as a human being. With the vision, I gained knowledge, and I knew that I saw the world as the creature did, the way everything is supposed to be. Finally, I could lie my eyes upon the creature. It stood about 8 feet tall before me, entirely covered in pulsating crimson skin, with legs so spindly it couldn't possibly support its massive frame. The head was far too large, malformed, and covered in pitch black eyes on all sides, each blinking independently from one another. At the center of its head, a single mouth was placed, one that stretched halfway across its face. Within it was lined with rows of broken teeth, and a tongue that split in half at the end. Magnificent, horrific, evil. Each word suitably described the monstrosity that had presented itself to me.
"I could feed on you for days,"
the creature said.
"But you are like me, and now you can see what this world truly is."
It laughed again. Its mouth almost inverted itself with each exhale, revealing farther rows of teeth that stretched all the way down its throat.
"Sleep, and don't fight it,"
it finally said before vanishing. Before I could process everything that had just happened, I awoke alone and safe in my bed. The room was still pitch black from my curtains, but I could sense that morning had arrived. The prior night seemed to be nothing more than a dream, and I let out a thankful sigh. As I pulled open the curtains, I was blinded by the sun shooting through the window. It overwhelmed me enough to push me to the ground, lying motionless in surprise. I could see, not just movement or lights, everything. I could see the world, the trees and birds, people walking from their homes to work, chatting and laughing about whatever adventures they had experienced the previous night. After more than 20 years living in the dark, the world had finally revealed itself to me, and I felt nothing but utter disgust. The world was ugly, and I wanted no part of it. During the following days, I locked myself at home, just calling in to work, making up a poor excuse that I had caught a nasty case of the flu. I kept a blindfold on the entire time, trying to block out the nasty sights of my own home. I contemplated poking out my eyes with a knife, in fact. I thought about it for days, but the creature's words still lingered in the back of my mind. "You are like me," it had said, and I finally began to understand. A lump had started forming on my cheek, and another one inside my mouth, just behind one of my molars. I removed the blindfold after some hesitation to check out what had happened on my skin. There it was, a pitch black eye forming on the side of my face. Still not mature enough to see, but growing bigger by the hour. In my mouth, I found a new tooth sticking out from behind my teeth. With the changes, I'm starting to understand what the creature meant. What we do. We feed off people and their fear of us, draining their life energy and leaving the empty body behind. When people suddenly die during the night, and people assume their hearts simply gave out, that's us. So don't be ashamed when you feel afraid of the dark, when the hairs on your neck stand up, because your fear is entirely rational, even though you never understood it. It's been a few days now. I'm starting to feel the never-ending cravings. I'll try to find a deserving victim, but it's hard when hunger is all that occupies my mind. I'm writing this so you will understand that I didn't choose this, that at least I've given you a fighting chance, and that I'm sorry if you're next.